Welcome back to Star Wars Fanatic, the channel where we dive deep into the stories, characters, and lore of the galaxy far, far away that we all love. Today we're exploring one of the most unique and groundbreaking shows in the Star Wars universe, Andor. Again, yes, I can't seem to stay away from this one, but it's a great show. This series is unlike anything we've seen before, with its darker tone, mature storytelling, and the absence of the usual Jedi, Sith, and Force-centric battles working so well for the Andor series. We'll be discussing how Andor was made for the older fans of the franchise, Tony Gilroy's vision for the series after Rogue One, and the mysteries that still linger as we anticipate the second and final season of Andor. So sit back and let's take a deep dive into this incredible chapter of Star Wars. If you're a huge fan of Star Wars like I am, go on and hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications to stay up to date on all the Star Wars content I release. I'm up at 3 a.m. every day working hard to ensure you get the best Star Wars content that YouTube has to offer. Other than Generation Tech, those guys are on a whole other level. They're amazing, but one can dream. But just as a reminder, if you haven't heard already, this channel will be changing its name to The Outer Rim within the next couple of weeks. I'll explain the details as to why at the end of this video, so stick around for it. You won't want to miss it. Now, let's get into Andor. Star Wars has been a franchise defined by its sweeping space battles, mystical force wielders, and grandiose clashes between good and evil. But with Andor, we're introduced to a side of the galaxy that has rarely been explored. A darker, more mature world filled with complex characters and moral ambiguity. In this video, we'll dive deep into how Andor isn't just a bold departure from the traditional Star Wars formula, but a series built for the older generation of Star Wars fans as well. This is a show made for those of us who grew up with the original trilogy and have been waiting for a more grounded adult take on the Star Wars universe we love, because we've grown. So we want to see Star Wars grow too. Let's explore how Andor redefined what it means to tell a Star Wars story and why we're all eagerly anticipating the second and final season of this remarkable series. When we think of Star Wars, most of us think of lightsabers, space wizards, and epic duels between Jedi and Sith. It's a franchise that has long been steeped in fantasy with clear-cut distinctions between good and evil. But Andor changes all of that. From the very first episode, it's clear that this isn't the Star Wars of our childhoods from the 70s and 80s. This is a show for the fans who grew up then, who now crave stories with more depth, more nuance, and more maturity. For many older fans, Andor feels like a breath of fresh air, while the prequels and sequels catered heavily to younger audiences, often focusing on spectacle and grandiose moments, and good storytelling as well. Andor takes a much more grounded approach. The battles aren't massive starship dogfights, and the stakes aren't defined by mystical prophecies or galactic destinies. Instead, Andor focuses on the personal, the intimate, and the deeply human struggles that come with living under the heel of a tyrannical regime. This shift in tone makes Andor feel like it was specifically crafted for the generation of fans who saw A New Hope in theaters, who grew up alongside Luke, Leia, and Han, and who now seek stories that resonate on a deeper, more adult level. Tony Gilroy, the creator and showrunner of Andor, knew exactly what he was doing when he decided to make a Star Wars show that would appeal to this older demographic. He didn't shy away from the darkness or the complexity of the story. In fact, he leaned into it, crafting a narrative that feels more relevant and impactful than anything we've seen in Star Wars before. Tony Gilroy is no stranger to the Star Wars universe. His work on Rogue One was a game changer, introducing us to a side of the galaxy that wasn't filled with Jedi and Sith, but with ordinary people fighting a war against impossible odds. In many ways, Andor is a continuation of that vision, but on a much deeper, more personal level, and a prequel to it. In interviews, Gilroy has often spoken about how he wanted Andor to be a story that didn't rely on Star Wars tropes. He wasn't interested in lightsabers or the Force. Instead, he wanted to tell a story about what it really means to live in a galaxy ruled by the Empire and little people, and how it affects the everyday people who don't have the luxury of mystical powers or grand destinies. Gilroy's vision was to create a Star Wars show that was grounded in reality, where the stakes felt real and the consequences of every action were deeply felt. Gilroy himself has said that Andor is a show for grown-ups. He knew that there was an audience of Star Wars fans who had grown up with the original trilogy and were now looking for something more adult, something that tackled the darker, more complex side of the galaxy far, far away. In one interview, he said, "I wanted to make a show where the stakes were real, where the characters were real, and where the consequences of their actions were just waved away by some magical force. I wanted people to feel the weight of the Empire, to understand what it means to live under that kind of oppression and evil." This vision is what sets Andor apart from every other Star Wars show or movie. It's not a story about heroes and villains in the traditional sense. There are no Jedi to save the day, no Sith Lords to battle in the skies. Instead, it's a story about ordinary people like Cassian, Andor, and Luthen Rael, who are pushed to their limits by the Empire's oppressive regime. These characters aren't fighting for glory or honor, they're fighting to survive. And that's what makes Andor feel so real, so raw, and so uniquely adult in the Star Wars universe. To understand Andor, we have to first understand the impact of Rogue One. When Rogue One premiered in 2016, it was praised for its grittier, darker tone. It was a story about sacrifice, about the high cost of rebellion, and about the people who would never live to see the fruits of their labor. While Rogue One was still filled with the familiar Star Wars elements, spaceships, blasters, and even a cameo from Darth Vader or two, it was clear that this was a different kind of Star Wars film. It was a war movie, more grounded and raw than anything we had seen before in the franchise. Rogue One showed us that Star Wars didn't need to be about destiny or prophecy. It could be about the people who fought in the trenches, the spies and soldiers who gave their lives for the cause. Andor takes that concept and runs with it, giving us an even more intimate look at the characters who operate in the shadows of the rebellion. Tony Gilroy, who played a major role in the success of Rogue One, has carried over many of the same themes into Andor, but where Rogue One was still somewhat tied to the larger Star Wars saga, with its direct connection to A New Hope, Andor is much more its own entity. It doesn't need to tie into the Skywalker saga or the battle between the Jedi and Sith. Instead, it focuses entirely on the human cost of rebellion, on the sacrifices made by ordinary people like Cassian Andor and Luthen Rael, and the countless others who fight against the Empire in the show. One of the most compelling aspects of Andor is how it shows us the rebellion from the ground up. In Rogue One, we see the rebellion as a somewhat organized force, with a council and leaders like Mon Mothma guiding the way. But in Andor, the rebellion is still fractured, still struggling to find its footing. Luthen Rael represents the darker, more ruthless side of the rebellion. He's willing to make impossible choices, to sacrifice lives for the greater good. His character is a stark contrast to the idealism we often see in other Star Wars stories, and it's the moral complexity that makes him one of the most fascinating characters in the series. Cassian Andor's journey in this series is one of the most compelling character arcs in all of Star Wars. When we first meet Cassian, he's a man on the run, living on the fringes of society, trying to stay one step ahead of the Empire. He's not a hero, he's a survivor. And that's what makes his story so relatable and so different from the typical Star Wars protagonist. Cassian isn't driven by destiny or the Force. He's not the chosen one. He's just a man trying to survive in a galaxy that's become increasingly hostile. But as the series progresses, we see Cassian transform into something more. He becomes a key player in the rebellion, not because he's seeking glory, but because he's been pushed to the breaking point by the Empire's relentless oppression. In many ways, Cassian's story is the heart of Andor. He represents the countless individuals who are forced to make impossible choices in the face of tyranny. His journey from a delusioned survivor to a committed rebel mirrors the larger themes of the series: how ordinary people can be driven to do extraordinary things when their backs are against the wall. One of the most striking aspects of Cassian Andor's character is his moral ambiguity. He's not a traditional hero. In fact, many of his actions throughout the series are morally questionable. He's willing to kill, to deceive, and to manipulate in order to survive. But it's his complexity that makes him such a fascinating character. He's not driven by ideals or a sense of duty, at least not at first. He's driven by the need to survive, to protect himself and those he cares about. And as the series progresses, we see him slowly come to realize that survival isn't enough. He has to fight back, not just for himself, but the future of the galaxy. If Cassian Andor is the heart of the series, then Luthen Rael is the mind. Luthen is one of the most enigmatic characters in Andor, and his role in the rebellion is unlike anything we've seen in Star Wars before. He's a man of mystery, operating in the shadows, pulling strings from behind the scenes. But what truly sets Luthen apart is his ruthless pragmatism. He's not fighting the Empire out of idealism or hope. He's fighting because he knows it's necessary, and he's willing to make sacrifices that others would shy away from. Luthen represents the darker side of the rebellion, the side that we don't often see in the more traditional Star Wars narratives. He understands that in order to defeat the Empire, the rebellion must be willing to do whatever it takes, even if that means compromising its own moral integrity. In one of its most memorable moments, Luthen delivers a monologue about the sacrifices he's made for the rebellion, admitting that he's given up his soul for a cause he may never live to see succeed. It's a chilling moment, and it perfectly encapsulates the moral complexity of the character. Tony Gilroy has spoken at length about how Luthen Rael was designed to be a character that operates in the gray areas of morality. He's not a traditional hero, but he's not a villain. He's someone who understands that in war there are no easy choices. He's willing to sacrifice lives, to betray allies, to make deals with criminals, all in the name of defeating the Empire. And in doing so, he forces us, the audience, to question what we would be willing to sacrifice for freedom. Luthen's interactions with other characters, particularly with Cassian Andor and Saw Gerrera, are some of the most compelling moments in the series. He constantly pushes those around him to make harder, more difficult choices, and in doing so, he challenges the very notion of what it means to be a good guy in Star Wars universe. In a franchise that has often relied on clear distinctions between good and evil, Luthen Rael is a character that lives in the gray, and that's what makes him so fascinating. One of the most striking differences between Andor and other Star Wars media is the almost complete absence of the Force. There are no Jedi, no Sith, no lightsaber duels. Instead, Andor focuses on the people of the galaxy who aren't gifted with Force abilities, and it shows what ordinary individuals can do when pushed to their limits by the Empire. This lack of the Force is a bold departure from Star Wars, a franchise that has often been defined by its exploration of the mystical. But in Andor, the absence of the Force serves a purpose. It grounds the story in a way that makes it feel more real, more immediate. Without the Force, the characters in Andor have to rely on their own wits, their own skills, and their own moral compass to survive. This makes their struggles feel all the more relatable and their victories all the more earned. In many ways, the absence of the Force in Andor is a statement about the galaxy itself. It's a reminder that the majority of people in Star Wars universe don't have access to mystical powers, nor the people that carry them. They don't have lightsabers to cut through their enemies or the ability to manipulate the minds of others. Instead, they have to live under the oppressive weight of the Empire, using whatever means they have to fight back. Sticks and stones, if you will. For older fans, this shift away from the Force is refreshing. It allows for a more mature, more grounded story to be told, one that focuses on the harsh realities of rebellion and oppression. And it's in this space, free from the larger-than-life battles of the Jedi and the Sith, that Andor truly shines. It's a show that isn't afraid to get its hands dirty, to explore darker, grittier side of the galaxy. As we eagerly await the second and final season of Andor, there are many questions and mysteries that remain unanswered. The show has masterfully woven a web of intrigue, leaving us open-ended with plot lines that have us all on the edge of our seats. One of the biggest mysteries revolves around Luthen Rael's true motives and his past. While we've seen him operate as a key architect of the rebellion, we still know very little about who he truly is and what his ultimate endgame might be. What drives a man to give up everything, including his morality, for a cause? What's his connection to other major players in the galaxy, and what secrets does he harbor that could shift the rebellion's course? There's also the question of Cassian Andor's journey. We know where his story ultimately leads in Rogue One, but Andor has shown us a much more nuanced and complex version of Cassian Andor than we've ever seen before. As we move into the second season, we're left wondering how Cassian's character will continue to evolve. Will he be able to maintain his humanity as the rebellion grows more desperate? How will his relationships with key figures like Luthen Rael and Mon Mothma shape his path? Then there's the lingering mystery surrounding Saw Gerrera. We know that Saul becomes one of the most extreme figures in the rebellion, but Andor has only scratched the surface of his transformation. How far will Saul go in his quest to defeat the Empire? And how will his radical methods influence the larger rebellion prior to his death in Rogue One? And finally, there's the larger question of how Andor fits into the broader Star Wars timeline. We know that the events of Andor lead directly into Rogue One, but there's still so much we don't know about the rebellion's early days. How does the story of Andor intersect with the larger events of the Star Wars galaxy? How will the show tie up its many threads while leaving room for the larger saga to continue? The anticipation for the second and final season of Andor is palpable. Fans are eagerly waiting to see how the story will conclude, and whether the show will continue to push the boundaries of what a Star Wars story can be. The first season of Andor has a new standard for mature storytelling in the Star Wars universe, and the second season promises to build on that foundation. Is it going to lead up into Rogue One, which will lead up into A New Hope, making one consistent story? Well, we'll have to wait and see. One of the most exciting aspects of the upcoming season is the prospect of seeing how the rebellion evolves. As we've seen in the first season, the rebellion is still in its infancy, fractured and disorganized. But as the second season progresses, we're likely to see the rebellion take shape, becoming the formidable force we know from Rogue One. This evolution will undoubtedly come with its own set of challenges, as the characters are forced to make increasingly difficult choices in the face of mounting pressure from the Empire. We're also excited to see how the show continues to explore the darker side of the rebellion. The first season of Andor didn't shy away from showing the moral compromises that the rebellion has to make in order to survive, and we expect the second season to delve even deeper into these themes. How far will the rebellion go in its fight against the Empire? What lines will be crossed, and who will be left standing when the dust settles? A lot of that we know from A New Hope, but they don't show us everything. And of course, there's the question of how the show will handle Cassian Andor's final transformation into the character we know from Rogue One. Will we see Cassian fully embrace his role as a rebel leader, or will he continue to struggle with the moral ambiguity that has defined his journey thus far? Whatever the case, we're certain that this story will be one of the most compelling arcs in all of Star Wars. Andor is more than just a TV show. It's a landmark moment for Star Wars fans. It's a series that proves that Star Wars can be more than just space battles and lightsabers. But let's not shy away from that too much, okay? It can be a story about real people facing real challenges in a world that feels grounded and immediate. It's a story that resonates with older fans who have been waiting for a more mature take on the galaxy far, far away. As we've grown, we'd like the stories to grow. Tony Gilroy's vision has given us a Star Wars story that feels like it was made specifically for those of us who have been with the franchise from the very beginning. It's a show that challenges our expectations, that forces us to think about consequences of rebellion, and that reminds us that even in a galaxy filled with mystical powers and grand destinies, it's the ordinary people who often make the biggest difference. As we look ahead to the second season of Andor, we can't help but feel excited for what's to come. The show has already proven itself to be one of the most unique and compelling entries in the Star Wars franchise, and we have no doubt that the final season will continue to push the boundaries of what a Star Wars story can be. It's just sad that it will be the last one. So for all of us older fans who have been waiting for a more adult take on Star Wars universe, Andor is the show we've been waiting for. And as we eagerly await the next chapter in this groundbreaking series, we can take comfort in knowing that Star Wars is still evolving, still surprising us, and still capable of telling stories that resonate on a deeper level. Andor is proof of that. Now, for the moment you've been waiting for. In the beginning, I told you this channel name will change to The Outer Rim. There's a huge reason for that. One, I'm staying away from the drama that's going on in the Star Wars fandom for the moment. I plan on staying away from it forever. I got caught up in it for a little while, and Fanatic seemed to fit in with what I was talking about back then. But this is a Star Wars channel, and I want to talk about Star Wars. I don't want to talk about the fandom. I don't want to talk about haters or anything like that. So I'm changing the name to stay away from that. Fanatic has this kind of negative connotation that could draw me into that kind of element, and that's not what I'm about here. I'm about Star Wars. I created this channel so I could talk about Star Wars without annoying my family. So I think the channel name needs to represent this growth that's going on with how I'm telling these Star Wars stories. So that's the reason behind it. And also, it's hard to merchandise things that have the name Star Wars on it. So, yeah, I need to change that. Not that I'm here to make money or anything, but if you guys want merchandise, then this is the best way to do it. All right, so if you're as excited about Andor Season 2 coming up next year, let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, like the video, share it with somebody or something. You can show it to a wall. I don't care, just share it. It's fun. Let's help this channel grow. Let's see if we can get up to 50,000 subscribers within the next, year or something. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Anyways, until the next time, this is Gerald. For now, I'm a Star Wars fanatic. Signing off. Wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, may the Force be with you, always.